Peggy Knight from the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area, and tonight we hosted a meals tax panel with representatives both supporting and against the meals tax panel, and one of the folks speaking tonight is...
My name is Herrity. I'm the Springfield District Supervisor on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, and I oppose the meals tax because it's a regressive tax. It's $100 million on top of $100 million taxes that we added to the burden already last year, and I think it's bad for Fairfax County. It's bad for the 40,000 people that work in the restaurant industry.
I'm Hynes. I'm the Hunterville District Representative on the Fairfax County School Board, and I am here tonight supporting the meals tax because I know for a few pennies more we can continue to make these really important investments in our school system. 70% of the meals tax revenue will go to the schools.
It's true that Fairfax County gets to keep 100% of the meals tax, while Virginia income tax we only get 21.6 cents on the dollar.
You want us to stay short? I can stay short. Yeah, 100% stays here, and yeah, we get 21 cents, 0.6 cents back on the dollar. We need to get more out of this state, but we got to do it smart. And the way to do it smart is to go down to Richmond with a plan, and we haven't had much of a plan when we go down to Richmond. We just ask for more money, which means that we get more money back from the state. We've got to focus those resources on programs like ESOL, like free and reduced meals, where we can get $1 back for the $1 we sent down. If we just try to fix education spending by increasing the total amount of education spending, it's more money going down to Richmond with a fewer amount going back. But we need a concentrated effort to go down there and work to increase the percentage we're getting back, number one. And the way we do that is by having it dedicated to programs that more of the money will come back to Fairfax County.
I had the opportunity to talk with the delegate just a couple weeks ago about this specific issue, and his basic comment was the county, first of all, the county ability to change the dynamics in Richmond is a long-term prospect, and the needs that we have in this county are near-term, immediate. The second is that so the money goes down to Richmond. We only get a quarter best of that the resources we send down there to come back to us. That's not an approach that is a winning approach. The winning approach is to keep the revenue here and have 100% control over that revenue. This idea that Pat offers that we can save our way out of our $75 million on the county side structural deficit next year and the $130 million structural deficit in the school system, it's just ludicrous. It's a smokescreen that prevents us, with the intent to try to minimize the sense of importance that the meals tax has for the future of the quality of our services and the quality of the school system.
We learned it many, many years ago, growing the commercial tax base at 25% allows us to have high-quality services at a cost our residents can afford without a meals tax. And we got to 25, we actually got to 27% commercial tax base, but we're hurt right now. We're down in the 18% and below. And that puts the burden on the residents.
One thing I just wanted to add is, the comparison of property taxes versus the meals tax. The property tax, higher income people usually live in more expensive homes and therefore pay a larger percentage of taxes, where your lower income, you might not live in an expensive area and pay as much tax. Whereas if you go to McDonald's and buy a Happy Meal and it's $5, someone earning minimum wage is going to pay 50 cents for a $5 meal, and someone who's making 6 figures is going to pay 50 cents on a Happy Meal. So it's very regressive.
Of the people who will be paying the meals tax in Fairfax County will be commuters and visitors, people who are not residents. So we're leaving that money on the table every year. Also, I would say when Mr. Herrity talks about the commercial tax base and how we should advocate in Richmond, I think those things would be great if we could change them quickly. But the commercial tax base is our reality now, and it has been for a while. And how do you draw employers here? How do you fill that space? Well, with great community services like wonderful schools. We just had a big employer announced that it will move into Reston, General Dynamics. I think I read about that, 1,000 jobs.
current services are in a deficit. We have firefighters who don't have the equipment they need. We have police officers who are driving cruisers that don't have enough room in their back seat to keep a prisoner. They have to lay the prisoner across the back. We have, in our schools, we have teachers who are leaving our school system for nearby school systems for $20,000 more.
Revenues don't meet needs to the extent that that has been happening since 2008. Unfortunately, we can make all kinds of cuts to central office, and we have over and over and over again. But there are two very big items in the budget. One of them, unfortunately, is teacher pay. We've got 25,000 employees. That's a big chunk of the budget. And the other is class size. You can increase class size by half a child and save almost $20 million. I mean, these are big tickets. So unfortunately, when you have to find that kind of money, the school board ends up going there. And it is really a shame. So what we have now is an opportunity to turn that corner and reinvest and bring our salaries, back up to market average. And so that's what we've done. When we have that kind of revenue, that's what we're trying to do. The question about property values, we know that property values depend on an excellent school system and excellent community services. And I do think that we're fraying around the edges, not only in the school system, but also, if you use the libraries or the parks, you know that the quality is not where it used to be.
What guarantee do we have that once in place, the meals tax will not be raised over time? And
It's a ceiling. There's a ceiling. The state-imposed ceiling.
so the General Assembly has fixed this for us, right? It can only be 4. So the proposal is to raise it, to create an ordinance up to 4%. I think you can be pretty confident that it'll be 4% if it passes. And then the other question is, will restaurants have to pay a cost to administer the meals tax, or will they be compensated in some way?
Credit card companies will be compensated. The processing fees for credit card companies there's been a talk about how $3 million will go towards restaurants to help with the processing fee. No one mentions that it's going to go to the banks that process the credit card transactions, which in itself, if you're on a $100 million tax at 3% of the taxpayers' money is going towards big banks, it's not a very efficient way to raise money.
I'm having a hard time with that one. What we do know is that there's no study that exists that demonstrates that there is a negative impact on the restaurant as a consequence of a meals tax imposition. Meals taxes are common.
There's one in Kentucky.
The one in Kentucky was by a student in a college who did a thesis prior to a sales tax referendum for the state of Kentucky, which passed. And the study itself was done on the internet, and it wasn't representative. It only demonstrated that there was a very, very small impact, even with the study as weak as it was, it only demonstrated a very, very small impact on restaurants. So to use that as a reference point is just not appropriate for our consideration.
The real reference point is us doing business in Fairfax County for 42 years.
And then also, there are some other critical classroom needs, and I would agree that class size is one of those, and that's something I'll be advocating for. The meals tax will not apply to school lunches. And the question of, whether the $70 million will actually come to the schools, the point is, that's on the ballot for the people of the community to vote on. And I think if we support the meals tax that says 70% will go to the schools, the message that this community is giving to the Board of Supervisors is that we expect 70% of meals tax revenue to go to the schools every year. And I think the Board of Supervisors, in fact, Sharon Bolova came out and said this exactly. She said, I expect the community to hold my feet to the fire on that. So that will, we don't expect the meals tax to be a panacea. We will advocate every year for funding for the schools, and part of our advocacy will be to make sure that that 70% comes to the schools in addition to the other revenue that would have come to the schools.
So just to be clear about what is in the referendum itself, revenues generated shall be dedicated to the following purposes: 70% of the net revenues to the Fairfax County Public Schools. There's no qualification there, there's no ambiguity there, it's very specific.
While the meals tax is currently largely dedicated to the public schools, I'm concerned that that could change. Is there language that would prevent the revenue from being used for other purposes?
I think that's a great question. I think I mentioned that earlier there is nothing legally to make sure that the money goes to Fairfax County Public Schools or it's only these dollars. It's got nothing to do with additional dollars. One question I have for the voters is, if you look at the history, why would all of a sudden this meals tax money go to teacher salary? If you look at the history of budget increases in Fairfax County, why all of a sudden with this money, would the board and the school boards decide that they're going to change all of a sudden what they've been doing? Now it's all of a sudden going towards teacher salaries is something that I'm concerned as a parent, and I don't see why to change what they've been doing.
Yeah, and as I said, the amount that goes to schools will be decided in April, like it is every year. After our budget public hearings, we will get together and figure out how much goes to schools. And, the comments about the budget committee meeting were right on. That there was a lot of discussion about whether that should be 70% or 50%. And the reason it's 70% is because that's what certain Board of Supervisors members said would be the right number to get it passed. Because it wasn't about the dollars going to schools, it was about what percentage should we put in there to get it past the voters. So it is a big concern how much money the schools are going to get and how much of that is going to teacher raises, so if it passed.
So it's interesting to me that the individual who voted against the referendum is somehow the spokesman on behalf of how the Board of Supervisors is going to respond to the directive from the electorate when it passes the referendum. We can surmise all kinds of scenarios, but what we do know is that this Board of Supervisors, in an 8-2 vote, approved this referendum with language that was specified use of the resources. I also wanted to just point out this idea of streamlining. During the recession period from 2009 onward, there were $300 million worth of savings and 700 jobs reduced at the county level. At the school level, 500 million and 2,100 employees reduced. So that's in totality about an $800 million reduction during the recessionary period. In other words, there has been streamlining, there has been reductions in force, and to use that as a rationale for not giving the county and school system an infusion of necessary resources is just inappropriate.
And I would just say, when we have an infusion of revenue above basic needs, cost, growth, and all of that, we do put it to teacher salaries. We have tried to. I'm a teacher myself, believe me. We work very hard to make sure that we're keeping our great teachers, and we just haven't been able to do it. I would just say, as far as naming rights, if you've been to Winchester High School, it is a gorgeous building. It is. But Winchester has one high school. We have 189 buildings. There is no way that naming rights are going to bring us $67 million a year. We do have something that we're talking about on the board, and we will, we will have a policy to make sure that we can take advantage of some naming rights. But it is definitely nowhere near the solution that we need.
I agree, that's a partial answer, it's not a total answer. You got to put a lot of things together to make it work. The comment I wanted to make real quick, you got to be real careful with the advocates, because they talk about the number of employees cut and the total dollars cut. Those are cuts from projected increases. Those aren't cuts. To think that we have fewer teachers today than we did 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, that's ridiculous. That's just flat out not true. So what they do is give you cut numbers from projected increases, like they really cut the budget. It's easy to project an increase and decide not to do that big of an increase. So take a look at the real numbers, take a look at the actual numbers on both, not the cuts from projected increases.
I know, I think you're hearing the apples and oranges problem that we always have, right? The school system continues to grow significantly every year. I think the one number that cuts through all the apples and oranges stuff is that we are spending less per pupil in real dollars than we were in 2008. Last year we were spending $1,000 less per pupil in real dollars than we were in 2008. That's an apples to apples number.
in terms of the county governments and the school budget growing, you know, how much of that is appropriate, and how do we fund that? You guys need to help me with who goes first. I keep losing track.
Okay. Sure, happy to start. Listen, we have to keep good going, right? We have great things going on in the school system and in this county. We have to be able to maintain the quality that is absolutely an expectation of this community. High quality schools, great libraries, beautiful parks and recreational facilities, safe neighborhoods. These are the things people come here for. We've got to keep that going. In a time when our population is growing, population of the county, population of the schools, and our needs are growing. You know, at the same time that the recession was making it harder for us to get the revenues that we needed just to kind of keep things going, the recession was also creating more need in the community. The percentage of students in our school system on free and reduced meals has grown significantly, and we're almost at 30% now. And that's those, you know, we meet every child's needs, absolutely. That's not a problem for us. We love the diversity of our school system, but it is a challenge to meet those needs. And costs go up, that's life, right? And so I think that what the school system, what the school board tries to do is be very transparent about what our future needs are. And the meeting that we had just the other night talked about, you know, the projected look at fiscal year 2018, and we lay it all out for everybody. And yeah, I think it's clear that in order to maintain quality in a time of growing needs and growing population, we probably do need to spend more money.
I can answer from a business perspective. When you have, you know, sales, you projected sales you can do the next year, and if they're going to be lower or higher, you have to make decisions based on priorities of what you think you should fund the money towards. If you are planning on having a down year, you have to make some cuts, and you have to decide, look, what's not as important. You have to make decisions that this is important to me. I'm going to fund these areas, but I might not have to fund these areas. If you're projecting to have a strong year, you're able to invest in different areas that you may want to test. Maybe you'll see if you get a benefit out of it. You can kind of experiment and see if, hey, maybe this will work or maybe it won't. But when you're having a down year, you have to make decisions to prioritize and put money where you feel like you need the most. And I've always wanted, as I said earlier, why are teacher salaries the first thing that the money goes towards? It seems like it's almost like we're not going to get money to teachers, so we can ask for more money later. And if we ever give the money the salaries to the teachers, maybe they don't have the bargaining chip to negotiate down the line.
I'll just add to that. I mean, it really comes down to focusing on your priorities. And when you're facing a $200 million shortfall, you don't spend $5 million on when you don't have any criteria, you don't have any projects in mind, you carry it forward, you reduce your deficit for the next year. When you are providing a benefit, like the Social Security supplement, that the new teachers that you're trying to attract into our system, you know, how many millennials care about something they're going to get at 55? That's 6%. That's 6%. We could give all teachers, if we could, and we can't do this, if we could wipe it away, but every year that we wait to address these kind of basic fundamental questions, we're getting to the point where we're paying more for people that are retired in the system than are in the system. And it's something that's unsustainable, it's a large cost that we need to address it, and we haven't addressed it. And putting this 10% tax on the homeowners isn't the way to do it.
You mean 4% on top of the 6% that the state receives, and we get 28% back, or 21% back? Is that what you mean? Look, when we look at the school system, when I was on the school board, we now have 20,000 students more since when I left the school board in 2009. Think about that. There are school systems that are no larger than 20,000. And so while John talks about the teachers taking the hit, the fact is when you have 20,000 new students coming into a large system, they cost money. The teachers have to be paid to educate those students, and that translates into an inability on the part of the school board to spread limited resources across a larger number of teachers to the point where their compensation can stay competitive. The facts are the facts. Our compensation is the lowest, is one the school system in this metropolitan area. We cannot sustain that situation and expect we're going to maintain the highest quality teachers that our children deserve.
It's an important question, so we let everybody answer it twice. I'm a legal immigrant. I am a legal immigrant. I chose to live in Fairfax because of its excellent school system. Maybe the schools could spend its money better, but why do we oppose a tax that is largely optional when that extra revenue can improve our education system?
You hear the claims about the meals tax being regressive, and while it's true that eating out is not necessarily a luxury anymore, it is always the choice. And with 65,000 Fairfax County students living in poverty, you can be sure that the school system is on the front lines every day, attending to their educational and personal needs. The extent to which a lower-income family pays a small tax on prepared meals that they choose to eat, that strengthens our ability to serve their children effectively. And those pennies on the dollar reward and repay them many times over. And I would just respond a little bit. I know, Mr. Norton knows everything there is to know about restaurants, and I certainly respect his opinion about how to prioritize in business. But for the school system, it's a little bit different. We asked the community last year, what are the priorities? If we have to cut, what would you cut, right? And we had a citizen task force come up with a list of 100 items. And in that conversation, what everybody realized was we don't want to cut our really great extracurricular and curricular programs. We don't want to do it. That's who we are. And that's where everybody fought so hard for that extra revenue this year. We can't put kids on a waiting list, right? We can't say, oh, we're just not going to teach this 20,000 kids this year. It's not our option.
Superintendent's task force, the list on the superintendent's task force of things that they weren't allowed to look at was a lot longer than the things that they were allowed to look at. And clearly compensation was taken off the table as well as a whole bunch of other things, so I'd be a little careful there. And I do have to point out, when I'm talking about addressing our pension issues, it's going forward. I'm not going to take away anything that we promised our teachers or our county employees. And I did make that statement earlier. I usually do when I talk pensions, but I want to make that clear.
And my guess is we don't have that power to take away pensions that have already been.
Actually, we do. I believe we do. We can change things. It's not fair, and I don't think the board ever would. I know I would never. You gotta look prospective.
I think 30 seconds.
So the key thing that I would like to emphasize is that what Pat has referenced a number of times tonight are anecdotal opportunities for small savings, or in the case of pensions, if it was a long-term savings to be realized. But we're talking decades worth of savings to realize the same level of revenue that the meals tax would generate. It's these anecdotes that try to our red herrings that try to blind us to the realities of what we're confronting both on the county side and the school side. Pat himself, in his newsletter, identified that $80 million worth of structural deficit has to be overcome in this next fiscal year. I would like Pat to say what would he do specifically for this next fiscal year to close that $80 million gap without the benefit of the meals tax.
That is a question coming up if you want to tackle the question of where would you cut $100 million if you had to cut?
On the county side, the school side is not 30 million.
But if we don't have the meals tax, so you can cut it from anywhere you want. We're going to come in $96 million lower. If we don't have the meals tax, what do we cut?
Well, I can start with a few things. I was prepared to actually list off all $100 million worth of things, but it certainly starts with the $13 million we spent on Tuesday. And how many board meetings do we have a year? Let's say 12. So if we keep that rate up, there's over $100 million right there, and we do pretty much keep that rate up. So that's one thing. You've got, if we had done something back in 2010, which we did do, but we got to start addressing our pensions and the Social Security supplement. You're not going to like this answer, but we spend hundreds of millions of dollars buying housing for people making up to $120,000 a year. shouldn't be doing that. We took, when people are unable to help themselves, we should be helping them. But people making $80,000, $100,000 don't need our help with housing. You look at Tyson's alone, there's $500 million in workforce housing that we basically spent in Tyson's Corner. It's $500 million. You want me to keep going? I could run the number up higher if you want. Then we could look at privatization. You could save $1 million by privatizing the county agency trash services. Actually, something the schools does very well. We did a debate. Were you on the board when we did the debate on the private? They were looking at insourcing the county trash routes in the schools, and we did an analysis and showed that the schools actually were doing the right thing and privatizing those and outsourcing it. So there's another $1 million, but so I can go on and on. If you want me to keep
So every public organization has an obligation to the taxpayer to streamline, to provide this level of services as efficiently and effectively as possible. No question. So this county and this school system are recognized as among the best in the nation. Not only because of the quality of the outcomes that they produce, but because of the quality of the capabilities of the staff that produces those outcomes. So the county executive is considered one of the best in the country because of the way in which he manages that large organization and the kind of ongoing savings that are realized or efficiencies that are realized. But studies are done, and Pat's well aware of the Ann Hewitt study. There's also a study in the Worthy Gardner study that he referenced the bad news that our regulatory system in the county is broken, needs to be fixed. There's a study underway to work through those issues. And you can be sure that, in my experience with this Board of Supervisors, that they are responsive to the best practices that can be undertaken within any county government. So I have quite a bit of difference in how I view the kind of leadership that we have and their sensitivity to the not only quality services but also the cost of those services.
Well, it's a time for me to just add something. I think the question was how would we find savings?
Where would you cut $100 million if this doesn't come through?
And no elected official wants to say, this is what I'm going to cut, right? So I'm not going to say that. But, well, this one doesn't want to right now because, we don't vote on the budget until later. And there's a reason for that. We have to see what's coming in. Unlike the county board of supervisors, the school board does not raise revenue. We are dependent on others for revenue. So, we won't make any decisions until we know what's coming in. But I can tell you what's at stake is that continued investment in our teacher salaries, that continued investment in our most important asset.
Mostly a comment, but I'm going to read it anyway, and then we'll move on to the next question. You suggested that the meals tax would hurt low-income families. Do you suggest that they eat out more than the wealthier middle-class families? Having their kids educated well may be the only way for them to get out of poverty. Not a question. Does passing a $100 million tax give Richmond an excuse to send less money to Fairfax County? Whose turn is it? We don't know. Go ahead.
They don't need an excuse.
That's a good answer.
The county identified for the supervisors that the state is $1.5 billion in arrears, if you will, on statewide education obligations. So they don't need a reason to not further support us. We just need to be smarter in how we support ourselves.
I'll just say I don't think it's going to have any impact on what they do or don't do. Again, in April we decide what we're going to spend on schools, and that'll be based on what the state sends us, and it'll depend on enrollment increases or decreases and all the other factors that go into what we do during public hearings and when we pass the budget. So.
And I think it's worth pointing out that there is a divide here based partly on trust. that there's a question of whether you believe that the Board of Supervisors is going to do what they say they're going to do, and do you believe that the county residents as activists have the ability to hold feet to the fire and make sure that the things that were promised actually happen? And so in that regard, civic activism, like everyone being here, is probably the biggest single thing to do that. But I guess that's my question is, what do you have to say about trust? Do we have good government here in Fairfax County?
Well, it's interesting because I think we're hearing it from two different perspectives, but I heard the Board of Supervisors saying we don't have to give any more money to schools. And so it's not that I'm making up that they're said that we could say that we're going to give the money to schools, but we don't have to give any more money to schools. We'll decide in April where the money will actually go.
You know, I was also at that meeting, and I think Pat was at that meeting, and I didn't interpret it exactly the same way, but you're saying, I can understand how you came away from that meeting with that impression. That was not my impression.
Well, one of the supervisors actually said we do not have to give, we legally are not bound to give any more than $70 million to the schools.
And that's a different question, right? There's no ordinance written yet, so legally they are not bound.
Well,
Do they promise
you will also remember, if you were at that meeting, that there was a certain supervisor that said that we need the language in it that'll get it passed, period. And that was the priority. So it wasn't that we needed to send money to schools. It was we needed whatever language and whatever percentage in there gave it the highest likelihood of passing. Now, is that disingenuous or is that disingenuous?
Again, I understand how you put it that way, but that's the way I took it.
And to go to the issue of trust, since I think we're still on our time, we spent a long time as a board of supervisors advocating for the school board to get an audit of the school board. And the audit of the school board has been on paid administrative leave for 2.5 months. And I need, for one, to understand transparently what in the world is going on. There have been a number of studies that point to efficiencies that really haven't been acted on, that really need to be looked at and acted on by the school board. So yeah, there is a little bit of a trust issue. There was a trust issue with the length of time it took to get established, and there's the what do you do with the studies? We've got a very open process on the Board of Supervisors with our auditor to the board, and our auditor to the board is holding our county staff's feet to the fire to make sure that we're doing things the best we can do in the county.
Pat, let me ask you a quick follow-up though. In terms of, it's an outside agency that looked at an outside group that looked at the cost per student, per pupil, compared it across the board. And Fairfax County spends less than, say, Montgomery County, which is probably the most comparable county to us in terms of size, et cetera. And when you look at the actual spending of less than $1,000 per pupil than it was before, does that provide some measure to you? Does that explain
Well,
there are some efficiencies being used?
If you look at costs per pupil as a measure of excellence in school systems, so the District of Columbia school system has the best school system in our region because they spend more per pupil than anybody else.
I think it might be arguing for that. But doesn't the reduction over time indicate?
It could indicate a lot of things. I mean, our schools have challenges, and it sounds like, and that's the unfortunate thing. This sounds like it puts me in a really bad position because it makes me sound like I'm anti-school, anti-teacher, and I'm not. I've advocated for teacher increases since I went on the board in 2008. I think the school system needs to be the number one. If we're going to solve our commercial tax-based problem, we need the schools to be our best. That's why I was upset at the superintendent for this #SaveFCPS, because she tore our school system down, which starts preventing us from having the solution that we need, which is to grow our commercial tax base. This isn't about schools versus restaurants. This is about a regressive tax, and it's about the schools are going to get what they're going to get based on their needs in April. This isn't about schools, and this isn't about teacher salaries. This is about another revenue source. It's about another $100 million on top of the $100 million. It's about not addressing the spending problem, but just looking for ways to pass it so you can get more revenue.
And I think I can safely say that Mr. Herrity, you're right. You know, I know that you care about the schools here. You've lived in this county all your life, right? And so the schools, I got your private school, so am I, Mount Vernon High School. I won't tell you what year. But we just have different opinion about how to get there. And I will say also, you know, the restaurants, hundreds, I don't know, thousands of restaurants in Fairfax County, and many of them are really important partners of the schools. They help the PTAs raise money. We will survive this. We will continue to have a good relationship with those business partners. Just quickly, Mr. Herrity brought up the Auditor General. As he knows well, when someone in the school system is on administrative leave, no one in the school system may say a word about it. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But I will say, our audit committee, since I got on the board 5 years ago, is significantly more independent and robust than it was. The school board's audit function is. We just met last night. We continue to work on our audit plan for the year, and it is robust. We have added to the usual fraud, waste, and abuse strategic planning and strategic risk analysis. We have 4 school board members, 2 county members on there who are very well qualified. So I feel very confident that our audit function is everything it needs to be. Towns and cities can do this without a referendum. That sounds easier. I found myself wishing, I wish we could just do it that way. But the value of having a referendum to the people is that we are getting a clear statement from the people of this county about their priorities, and we will remind the Board of Supervisors what our priorities are.
The county currently offers property tax relief if you're over 65, disabled, or below an income level. Is there a belief in the increased meals tax for the same people?
But as I mentioned earlier, the supervisors will have the responsibility, once the referendum passes, to define how it wants to implement the meals tax. And if, in its wisdom, it feels that there is a benefit to be realized by providing seniors with fixed income who don't have other sources of income, that will be up to them at that point in time. But that will be something I'll have to debate. But in my judgment, it's again, one of those issues that is not, it would suggest that the meals tax is regressive. In fact, the meals tax, if you're a senior with a fixed income, having to pay property tax, you have no choice. But you're going to have to pay that tax or you lose your home. And when it comes to the meals, there's discretion involved. And we all don't have to be out in a sit-down restaurant all the time. But again, this is a non-issue. What our study has shown is that the 60% of the revenue generated by meals tax is by the top 20% of the income earners in the county. So, and that translates into about $230 some dollars is what one would anticipate the high end of the county paying for a meals tax. The low end, we're talking about, at the lowest end of the spectrum, we're talking about $50 that would be paid by the meals tax a year. These are both annual numbers.
The answer is no. So is a relief for that group? I'm sorry. The answer is no. And in the 2 areas that we have restaurants that pay meals tax, the citizens are taxed at the same rate.
There's been a great deal of discussion about how the meals tax revenue will be spent. Doesn't the referendum clearly state 70% will go to schools, many of the questions that I've just flipped through, and 30% will go to county services, capital improvements, and property tax relief? And again, we're talking about a question that this is an ordinance. Maybe you could go explain that the ordinance be written after the fact, although this is the way it's been presented.
Well, I can present the process, but I mean, I think we've gone over this back and forth. I think the positions on either side are clear, but the process here is that if this were to pass, which I don't think it will, but if it were to pass, then the Board of Supervisors would have to prepare an ordinance. There would be public hearings on that ordinance. So the referendum passing doesn't necessarily mean you'll end up with a meals tax. I would expect you would, but that ordinance would have to be drafted. There would be a thing on it, a public hearing and then a vote on it. As to whether that money actually gets to the schools, the projected 70 million would get to schools. And I don't know why I'm going over this again, but whether the board in April will give the schools 1.6, 1.7 like they did last year, 1.8, 1.9, or 2 billion, that's all getting decided in August. So whether this 70 million is clearly not an additional amount to schools. That 70 million will go to schools, but it's not an additional. It will be decided in the board. If you ask any board member, they'll tell you the same thing. We're going to decide in April what the schools get.
Well, yeah, I do think we've talked about this before. We may be kind of going over the same ground, but I think when it passes, not if it passes, but when it passes, we will expect that Board of Supervisors will do what the people of this county have asked them to do, which is to bring in extra revenue every year from a modest meals tax, pennies on the dollar, that will bring in almost $100 million a year, and to take 67 million of those dollars, at least in the first year, and presumably it will grow every year, because that's actually what happens with meals taxes in other places. The revenue, the restaurant industry revenue actually grows if you look at the history. And that this community will have voted for a meals tax that brings 70% the revenue to the school system, in addition to the revenue that is already expected for the school system.
Is there any direct relationship between spending more money on education and student success?
I think the reality is that this community, and I've already said it a few times tonight, this community expects world-class schools. We're not looking at, reading, writing, arithmetic, and dodgeball here, right? We have really strong programs that are unusual. One of the schools in my district is Fox Mill Elementary, which has a Japanese immersion program. Wonderful program, very unusual. And when you go out and you talk to the parents there, I went to a PTA meeting and the cafeteria was full, and one parent after another got up and said, I am in the Fox Mill neighborhood because of this Japanese immersion program. Those are the kind of things this community expects. Do we need to do those things? No. But we want to. That's what this community wants. So I wouldn't say necessarily that an extra dollar spent leads to extra achievement for students. I don't know if you can draw that, but I can tell you that the revenue that this community spends on the great programs that we have bring great families here, and I mean, look at the results. This is an excellent school system, and the school systems that we compete most closely with, I think you were right, Mary, that it is Montgomery County. We don't compete with DC because that's a large urban system with a lot of problems that we don't have, but Montgomery County in Maryland is a large suburban system that is a lot like ours, and we compete well with them, spending a lot less per child.
I already made my comment on, spending as being the metric. DC schools would be the best, and they're clearly not. But let me tell you something I learned growing up around my kitchen table, and that was one of my dad's mantras, and it's one of mine, is that in order to have the best school system, you have to have the best paid teachers. And I truly believe that. And that is what we got to focus on, because teachers are the ones that actually teach the kids. Now, if you talk to teachers in Fairfax County, and I spent a lot of time talking to principals and talking to teachers, you talk to teachers and they'll tell you, yes, they're concerned about salary, but they're also concerned about the administrative burden that's being placed on them. And I hear more about the administrative burden on our teachers than I hear about their salary issues. But when I talk to the principals that are trying to hire the new teachers coming in, what I hear is that the salary's not there. So we need to fix the salary problem. But when I also talk to the teachers, I'll tell you what the teachers say when I talk to them. I asked them about the Social Security supplement, and they said, yeah, we tried to talk to them about the Social Security supplement. They're not interested. You know, so we need to take that 6% we're spending on Social Security supplement and start moving it towards compensation. And that's really the discussion that we need to be engaging on. But that doesn't have anything to do with the meals tax. This is just another $100 million on top of the last $100 million we need to start addressing spending.
We know where to stand. Under what, and this is a question that came in during the week, under what circumstances would you be on the other side of the issue? What would change your mind about granting or not granting the Board of Supervisors with the authority to implement a meals tax? Like, in a sentence.
Yeah, if we didn't believe that they were effective and efficient. They're not, so if we felt that they were very inefficient and ineffective, it wouldn't justify or warrant additional revenue.
Yeah, if I could just add, I mean, I think if there were another option, you know, and I think that's one of the things, counties' hands are tied in Virginia. Oh, I don't really like the idea of a single industry tax either. It doesn't really feel fair necessarily for all of our restaurant partners out there in the county. But it really is, it's the reason that, again, the majority of counties and the majority of municipalities in Virginia have gone to the meals tax as a way to balance their revenue stream. And there's not another option for us locally that will bring in the same revenue.
If I thought we were spending our money efficiently, then I wouldn't. Okay, you guys going back and forth?
Well, I was trying to get it done in a sentence. So go ahead.
I was just say if I thought we were spending our money efficiently, then I might think about it. But that would be the only reason. I have a deep down hatred for single industry taxes. One of my favorite stories. I ended up supporting a single industry tax. I was on the executive committee of the Fairfax County Chamber when the hotel tax came out. And that was an industry that got behind it because part of the money went to promote their industry. And I supported it. And when the arts group came to me and said, you know, they want a piece of the meals tax, and we were talking about the meals tax earlier, I said, well, we could do a theater tax. Well, they didn't want any part of the theater tax being from the arts community, but if they needed money, but they were against single industry taxes too. But they're for this tax because it's the restaurants and the grocery stores and the people that are going to have to pay it. So,
but the hotels pay taxes. The real owners pay taxes. I mean, there's a plethora of single industry taxes being paid to the B-Pol and so on. What I want to reiterate based on Supervisor's comment is that on one hand, the Supervisor is saying he has an auditor that he couldn't be more proud of, who's done his job, the county's done it so well that there's efficiencies popping up right and left. And at the same time, in the next breath, he'll diminish the work of that same group of people and saying that the county's inefficient.
I was saying, we've got a lot of work to do on our side, but it's not the auditor's fault, it's the Board of Supervisors' fault largely.
This will be the last question. What is your prediction about the outcome of the referendum? Will it pass? Do you want to predict a percentage? And do you think anything about the national race on the ballot will impact the outcome of the meals tax referendum?
So, you know, you want me to predict the outcome? Well, we did a survey, and the survey basically, it was a fair survey. It was a straightforward question, not a leading question. But 60% opposed it, 28% supported it, 26, I'm sorry, I thought it was 28. I thought you said you didn't know the number.
I know they can check.
Oh, okay. Republican. This isn't a Republican Democrat. Republican, independent, people that identify them as Republicans themselves as Republicans, those that identified themselves as independents, and those that identified themselves as Democrat, the majority of all three categories oppose this tax. So I don't think it's gonna pass. So I think we better start moving on the discussion to how we're going to efficiently spend our tax dollars.
Okay, well, my prediction is that it will pass, definitely, with flying colors. And the reason that I feel confident about that is that we have an incredible coalition behind this grassroots campaign for the meals tax. Invest in Fairfax is the umbrella group that is behind the campaign, and it includes people around the table from not only the PTAs, but and the teachers' unions, but also firefighters, police, the arts people, the libraries, the parks people. I mean, we have folks all around the table.